Bonsoir à tout le monde. Il y a encore les dernières qui arrivent. Allez-y, allez-y. Donc, on va commencer la soirée et l'introduction en français. Et après, la conférence va être en anglais. Donc, ça ne pose pas de problème, a priori. Vous êtes tous parfaitement anglophones. Alors, ce soir, je suis très heureux d'accueillir Vasa Perovič de l'agence Bevk Perovič Ljubljana. C'est aussi parce que ça a une petite histoire, cette conférence. Comme vous avez peut-être tous su, et aussi ceux qui ont participé, je ne sais pas s'il y a des gens dans la salle qui étaient avec nous oui, là-haut, à Ljubljana. Donc cette année, c'était notre voyage en licence 2, qui était donc une découverte d'une ville européenne. Donc on était à Ljubljana. Et dans ce contexte-là, on a découvert donc une ville extrêmement intéressante et dynamique. Et évidemment aussi des architectes qui vivent dans cette ville, qui travaillent et qui effectivement font partie d'une scène architecturale jeune et très intéressante et très ouverte à l'Europe, et qui ont tous fait un parcours, je dirais, européen, dans le sens qu'ils n'ont pas que fait des études dans leur ville ou dans leur pays natal, ils ont tous allé aussi dans d'autres grandes villes ou dans d'autres, je dirais, formations post-master. Et donc, parmi ceux qui ont créé et qui ont monté cette scène architecturale jeune de Ljubljana et de la Slovénie, donc il y a Vasa Perovič qui est ce soir avec nous et qui a fait un parcours, je dirais, typique pour cette génération. D'ailleurs, il n'est pas slovène, il est de Belgrade d'origine, donc il a fait des études à l'université technique de Belgrade. Et il a donc fait, après son diplôme, aussi un master au Berlage Institute à Amsterdam. Nous, on s'est connus déjà à cette époque-là. C'était un peu une connaissance presque par hasard. Et c'est intéressant qu'après 20 ans, on se retrouve ici, dans une salle de conférence à l'ENSAS. Parce que moi, à l'époque, je n'ai pas fait des études à Berlage, mais on s'est rencontrés dans un cadre d'un autre collègue qu'on partage, ou un copain à nous. Et donc, on s'est rencontrés à l'époque, en 93, à Amsterdam, en faisant tous les deux un concours, pas sur le même sujet, mais en tout cas, on se fréquentait déjà à l'époque. Donc, ça, c'est la petite anecdote personnelle. Et dans le cadre de notre voyage, je vous annonce aussi, avant que je présente Vasa Perovič, aussi quelque chose qui nous a fait beaucoup plaisir cette année, que les travaux des étudiants sont maintenant même exposés dans cette ville où on a travaillé. Donc, c'est une exposition qu'on a réussi à monter avec beaucoup d'efforts, un peu aussi des moyens. Et finalement, donc, cette exposition, elle se fera à partir du 4 décembre, pardon. 4 décembre, donc le vernissage aura lieu le 4 décembre. Donc, perhaps Vasa will go to the vernissage of our exhibition, we will see. Et effectivement, donc, il y aura la production de nos analyses sont donc à voir dans ce cadre-là à l'Institut d'urbanisme de Ljubljana. Grâce aussi évidemment à Frédéric qui est avec nous, Frédéric Jeanroy, qui a aussi contribué à cette réussite, et aussi Christian Horn qui s'est beaucoup investi. Il n'est pas là ce soir malheureusement, mais je voulais quand même dire un grand merci à lui. C'est grâce à lui aussi on a pu faire ce montage, et je crois que c'est une grande première. On espère qu'on peut continuer dans ce sens-là, qu'on laisse des traces dans ces villes où on a travaillé avec vous ensemble sur le développement de la ville et du projet urbain. Revenons sur notre invité ce soir. Donc, Vasa Perovič a fondé son agence en 97. Donc l'agence s'appelle Bevk Perovič. Et donc très tôt, ils ont eu un grand succès avec des projets un peu emblématiques. D'ailleurs, il est arrivé à Ljubljana, ce qu'il m'a dit, grâce à un concours. qu'ils ont gagné donc, à l'époque. Et c'est comme ça qu'il a adopté cette ville, comme ça, maintenant, pas sa ville natale, mais en tout cas sa ville où il exerce et où l'agence qui a à peu près maintenant 12 collaborateurs, où ils sont donc très actifs dans toute l'Europe. Je ne vais pas effectivement citer tous les projets, parce qu'il y en a beaucoup, et ça nous retarderait beaucoup de voir aussi ce qu'ils nous présentent ce soir. Mais peut-être 2-3 mots sur la production de l'agence. Effectivement, ils ont beaucoup travaillé sur du logement social. On a vu donc avec les étudiants plusieurs projets qui étaient un peu des projets emblématiques de l'époque, qui étaient aussi pas mal publiés. Mais il n'y a pas que ça, il n'y a pas que du logement social, il y a aussi évidemment des projets, donc des maisons individuelles. D'ailleurs, peut-être il y a 2-3 projets que je peux citer qui ont été publiés et qui sont donc aujourd'hui un peu connus, je dirais, dans la scène européenne. Donc il y a donc une maison, c'est la maison SB, donc c'est une des premières. Ils ont tous des initiales d'ailleurs, les maisons et les projets, donc il faut s'y retrouver, mais vous pouvez facilement les trouver sur leur site internet. D'ailleurs, sur le site de l'école, on les trouve aussi, ce lien. Et donc ça, c'était une des premières maisons qui était construite en 2002, avec une façade en bois et une forme assez intéressante en recherche typologique et formelle. Après, il y en a d'autres, la maison D, etc., etc. Et en même temps, ils ont quand même développé aussi une culture et un travail important sur des équipements publics. Notamment, on va voir ce soir un projet sur l'université, un projet sur la nouvelle bibliothèque universitaire qui est en train de se faire actuellement à Ljubljana. On aura aussi des projets qu'on va voir, des équipements à Bruxelles, parce qu'ils travaillent beaucoup ensemble avec des architectes belges, les Architects. C'est des partenaires belges avec lesquels ils ont aussi un réseau et ils construisent ensemble. Et évidemment, ils ont aussi construit des projets où ils ont fait des concours et des projets qui sont aussi dans tout ce qui est équipement sportif. Je ne vais pas vous ennuyer encore plus avec une liste ou une sorte d'énumération de projets. Juste encore 2 mots sur les récompenses. Ils ont eu donc un prix Miss van der Rohe en 2007, qui est quand même un peu le Pritzker-Preis européen de l'architecture. Et ils ont aussi eu le Kunstpreis de la ville de Berlin en 2008. It was 2008, the prize, Kunstpreis. Donc des récompenses donc assez, je dirais, prestigieuses. Qui donc montre aussi que leur production trouve un grand intérêt dans la scène architecturale européenne, voire, je dirais, presque un peu mondiale. Je laisse maintenant la parole donc, à Vasa, et donc il va nous mener à travers plusieurs projets qui sont en cours et qui vont se faire actuellement à l'agence. And I'm very glad that you're here now, and I hope we will see this night very nice projects and also nice ideas about architecture and the world of architecture in Slovenia and in Europe. So it's up to you.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe I can shout enough and you can all hear me, because all of these things are picking up sound. But so, hi, good evening. I think after this very, very long introduction by Dominic, I can just show a few slides and we can go. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for the invitation to come here and give a little talk. Well, basically, Dominic told you more or less everything about us. We are 2. The front part of this is my partner, Matija, and the back part of the word is me. And we work with another 12 people in Ljubljana. We work already for 17 years. Our office is quite international. There's very few Slovene people. And one of the guys in the office actually comes from here, already works for us for 8 or 9 years. He's actually from this school, so he was upset that I was going to see this new school building before him. Well, apart from this, thanks for the invitation. When Frederic asked me to give a kind of a title, I was proposing the title Individual versus Collective, because I'm going to try to show you, I hope, I speak very fast English, so if you don't follow, either wave or shout. I'm going to just go through maybe a series of projects and then maybe stop on 1 or 2 or 3 projects for a long time, maybe because for a little bit longer time, because I don't know how well you know the work and how well you know Slovenia. Some of you have been to Slovenia, some of you have been to Ljubljana, and some of you have probably also been to our office, so I think I spoke to a few of you already before. If we, not all the images are just buildings. This looks like a building, but it's actually a collection of skies. These are cutouts from the newspapers, from the daily newspapers. They're done by a Catalan artist whose name is Ignacio Bali, and he collects the skies from the magazines. So he doesn't really make artworks. It's a big archives of skies of all the events. There are backgrounds to all the events that happen in the world over 1 year, and he arranges them in this kind of archives. If you come closer, you will see that if you can read the words, I can't even from here, but you have to trust me, basically it's all these different parts of the world which are all united by this one sky, but the sky is always different. So in that sense, this is also how we see our practice a little bit, depending on where we work. We mainly worked in Slovenia for many years. Now we are working quite a bit abroad. We always try to kind of adopt one of the skies that we try to work in. But of course, as we come from Slovenia, I'm going to just give you a few, without trying to sound like a tourist guide, just a few basic facts, because I think we are pretty unknown. Well, we are, it's my adopted country, as Dominic said. So it's a country somewhere lost in between Italy, Austria, and Hungary and Croatia. Over there, Ljubljana is the capital. It's a very specific territory. You know this territory because it was very popular because of the wars that were going on for some 15 or 20 years ago. Not in Slovenia itself so much, but all the rest of former Yugoslavia. So Slovenia is one of those countries from that seceded from the former Yugoslavia. But also, if you look at, I'm not going to look so much at the political space, but more at the cultural space of Slovenia. We were discussing it with Dominic today, because I had an enormous tour of Strasbourg, so I know it very well by now. If you do a kind of, it's a similar situation, I would say. If you do a 300-kilometer circle around Ljubljana, you will basically see the influences that are happening over this region. It's everything from Venice to Munich. And to Vienna is basically congregating in this area. So over the centuries, all of these different powers have had rule in this country, and this country only exists for 20 years now, or 20 and a half years. And this is what happens there. It's partly the influences of the Mediterranean and kind of Catholic culture of Italy, and then also the Protestant Germanic cultures that come together in this one spot in Europe. This is one thing. The other thing, of course, it's also visible in the city that we live in. This is Ljubljana, for people who haven't been there. That's the center of the city. It's a small city. It's, I think, even smaller than Strasbourg, if that's possible. And it's a kind of a mix of all these cultures and mix of all these periods. So it's a pretty beautiful city, which is a mix of Middle Ages and then 19th century and 20th century and some of the modernism. If you have been around Slovenia, or if you read about Slovenia, or if you Google Slovenia, the first thing you read is the landscape. The Slovenian landscape is, of course, pretty spectacular. This is not us, because architects have to work most of the time. So these are the retired parents of my partner, so they can walk in the mountains. But it's famous for being the second most wooded country in Europe. Slovenia is famous for that, and famous for these incredible landscapes. Also, maybe less famous, but equally interesting for us as architects, also famous for some architectural typologies, very specific things that have developed in this region over centuries. And these are these kind of houses that are not houses. These are the hayracks. These are the constructions that basically look like a little village, but this is where the people dry the grass. This is somewhere near the lake of Bohinj, and this is something that's maybe specific to Slovenia. not even in Austria, but also what is generic, what belongs to all of us. I think France has quite a lot of this shit as well, is the destruction that we have done over our landscapes. The lack of understanding that we have had for this cultural landscape that we inhabit is the same. Regardless of the fact that Slovenia was for very many years part of Yugoslavia, therefore socialist, and France was a kind of a social country with a capitalist organization. I mean, destruction that we did over the space that we inhabit is exactly the same. It has nothing to do with politics. What is specific to Slovenia is this one person, this is one architect who is embedded in the idea of Slovene culture, and it's something that is maybe unique in Europe. The only other country being maybe Finland, because Alvar Aalto is very similar. He is a part of the kind of cultural physiognomy of Finland, if you want. This is Jože Plečnik. He was a student of Otto Wagner in Vienna and then went to work in Prague. He did the Hradčany Castle renovation for the Czech president Masaryk, and then came back to Ljubljana and basically created the city that you see today, because he transformed the city of Ljubljana from the medieval provincial town into what you see today as a kind of a spectacular little city along the river. He did a lot of urban replanning, but this is also one of his most famous buildings. This is a National and University Library of Ljubljana, to which we are now doing an extension. This is the most famous building of Slovenia, in a way. What is so interesting about this guy, this is not very old. This is the beginning of the 20th century, so this is the moment just before Corbusier starts doing, for example, things like Pessac or something, is that he is trying to merge the languages of Europe, the languages of this region, basically everything from Northern Europe to Byzantine influences to Knossos from Greece, into one singular language. It might look to you as young architects a bit odd that I'm showing this kind of very strange, archaic looking buildings, but I think this is a kind of very important influence on what we do, even though of course our buildings don't look like this, but this kind of ability to understand and digest all these different cultures into one is something that's kind of fascinating. There were, of course, other people, modernists, like Edward Ravnikar, who built these two buildings, which were supposed to be the headquarters of the Communist Party. They are in the center of the city of Ljubljana. They never became the headquarters of the Communist Party, but in fact they are now headquarters of a Belgian bank. And of course, you see a lot of influences of Aalto, because a lot of influences in Slovenia in the 1960s and 70s were coming from Scandinavia. And the same two buildings, of course, the political systems change, but the architecture always stays. So the same two buildings are the background for Slovene accession to the European Union some 10 or more years ago. So in a way, it also, if you're a young architect, gives you a little bit of pause when you think that the things that you do today are going to be there, even if maybe the whole countries and political regimes may change. We also like this kind of, this is a wonderful construction in wood, somewhere near Croatian border, done by an architect who did only 5 or 6 projects in his whole career. But I think that this maybe construction, it covers the archaeological excavations in the middle of the field. It kind of summarizes let's say the thinking of this of Ken Frampton when he talks about critical regionalism, something that kind of puts together the language, not so much the language of modernity, but the modernist thought and structure with a kind of a local language, and creates a kind of a unique new expression. His name was Otto Njugovec. But of course, to get back, to run away a little bit from this tourist agency, inviting you to come for your next holidays to Slovenia, I'll go back to Ignacia Bali. This is another of the archives he does. It's an archive which is called Demonstrar Nada, to show nothing. It is an archive of the hands of the politicians. These are all empty hands. Maybe you see it here, or maybe you see it better here. The empty hands of the politicians that somehow describe the promises, the empty promises, but also, in a way, these are all pictures, in fact, from my living room. These are, somehow I think that they're kind of suitable for this. Also, in a way, describe, in a way, our job. What we as architects try to do. We try to somehow, let's say, define certain amounts of space, which has a certain amount, a certain definition, sometimes one, sometimes the other, and in a way kind of create spaces that then become habitable and then become parts of the cities that we inhabit. if I try to talk about the work that we have done in the last 15 years, I'm going to be now very, very quick. We have done a lot of social housing. When we started the office, this was something that nobody really wanted to do because everybody said the budgets are so small, you cannot do anything. It's kind of a stupid thing to do social housing because it's so limiting. So we said, okay, maybe because we were young and because we had nothing else to do, maybe this is the only thing that we can do. So we did a lot of social housing projects, some more, some less successful. And somehow this became the kind of the basic, let's say, tool of our work. This is a very early project for housing in Maribor, in another city in Slovenia, where we basically convinced the client, the social housing corporation, because they were building on a super busy intersection, that in fact they should build in the children's playgrounds into the building. Why do I show this project, which is already quite old? So all the spaces are built into the building. You see it over there, open air. You see it over here. That already in those blocks, which were very, very modest in means, they were built for extremely small amounts of money, we were trying to think of the possibility to express the kind of an individual habitation within a kind of a collective form. This is something that we thought was incredibly important, especially in the case of social housing, within these kind of massive blocks, to have the possibility of recognizing your own unit. We did it also in other projects. This is something that some of you have visited, and this is why I show it very shortly. I don't know, Dominic has seen it. This is student housing that we did for the University of Ljubljana, so for the school where I teach, but not for students of architecture. It can be for everybody. And it was a project, a bit anomalic project, of course, because it was the left-wing government which was going out and wanted to have the votes of the students. So we won the competition. We had to build it extremely quick, and we had to simplify the project to a point where we basically separated into these two pieces, a kind of plateau of public programs and then some slabs on top with the student rooms, where basically we try to convince our clients, the university, that the student housing is something which is somebody's home for 4 years or 5 years of their life. So it's not really a room that you inhabit, but it's a kind of someone's home which consists out of this very large public space on the ground floor, where there are all glass walls that don't separate the programs by hierarchy, because the bicycles are exactly next to the study spaces, only separated by glass facade. So it's a kind of a big public area. And then we also try to convince the client, the second thing, the 4 slabs of apartments, that all of the apartments should be the same. There are no apartments for invalids, and no apartments for families with 2 children, and no apartments for single people. This should be only one apartment which can work in all of these options, because there should be a kind of an open model of habitation which you can. So for example, this drawing here shows that each of these units, which is 1 room, 2 room, prefab bathroom, kitchen in the middle, and the dining room that they share, no corridors, is basically here in 4 people configuration, but it exists in all other configurations that I just mentioned. So it's one singular unit fit for everybody. Of course, it helped with the production, because we had to build this in a super short amount of time. It also helped us with articulation. Each of these units only has 1 window that you see on the street, and this is the public face of the unit. So this is your individual home. This is what you recognize as your home for 5 years studying at the university, and the rest is private terraces which are screened by these folding screens. The fact that this is the center of the unit, I have much more explicit photographs of this couple, because this was sent by my students who were taking pictures. Also, in a way, shows, in fact, what we try to do. We try to express this, let's say, the minimum of individuality of the unit on the facade of the building itself, while actually preserving a lot of the spaces for the kind of private parts of the unit. We also worked on projects like this. This looks like Berlin in 1980, but it's in fact Ljubljana in 1980. So we inherited an old urban plan, which when we went to visit it, it is also social housing. Social housing, as you know, is super regulated, so you have to have enormous amount of children to qualify for social housing, and you have to be unemployed, and you have to be I don't know what. So basically these units are very small. And we were supposed to this was a fixed urban plan, so the whole project becomes transformation of an urban plan, in fact a fight against the urban plan. When we went to see the site, we were shocked to see that these are the first 6 buildings of the city of Ljubljana. If you come by train from Zagreb, this is the first image of Ljubljana that you see. So it looks very urban, but in fact it's total suburbia, no? So these 6 buildings became like sentinels that guard the city of Ljubljana. around the central area, which is the kind of the common living room, which is where all the people basically chuck out their children from the apartments, which the articulation of this space becomes extremely important. It's not really a landscape. We never saw it as a landscape. We saw it as a kind of a plateau where all of the generations can overlap. And when we use the green elements, more like building blocks that separate teenager playground from the small kids. And then the idea that you should transform the houses as well from this is what the urban plan said, a kind of a very formal expression, into something which is this, which is basically the building that appears different from all sides, so that every time you look at the building, it actually has a different kind of appearance. And pushing out the balconies, because these units are so small that the balcony takes form of a kind of a suspended garden. The image that you see of the buildings, everybody asks us about this, and everybody is actually horrified. People don't like these buildings. Comes from the fact that we use the productive size of the panel and cover the facades and always cut the last panel. And the fact that as architects we always try to make things perfect, so ideally as an architect you would make this into a wonderful panel where you wouldn't see anything. We actually enlarge the screws, so what you see, these kind of white dots, are in fact the underlayers of the screws, so you see them from 5 kilometers away. So the first thing you see about these buildings is, first of all, this kind of strange form that denies being a house, and also this enormous amount of dots that show the most minuscule element of the building as that's the first thing that you see. This is that housing, and then afterwards we won that project for, this is second part of that housing, where we try to again experiment with construction. We actually think that the idea of relation in between the unit and construction is something that is extremely important. This here, we constructed the buildings out of concrete, like shelves, without insulation. And then we inserted the wooden constructions into the building. So basically what you see here, these are the wooden constructions. So they're built like small sheds in the garden, inserted into very large concrete structures. So the building is a kind of a shelf full of individual apartments. That also means that each apartment is physically also insulated from the next door apartment. So in a sense, there's kind of this feeling, at least maybe for us as architects, of individuality of the unit. And then last year we won the in-between space, so we became our own context. So we are building in between two of our projects. So we actually did a kind of also a joke, let's say, a typology that is in between the two, one in between the city block and the villa block that we had before. And we are actually, I'm not going to bother you with this, trying to do it now. It's actually under construction with a series of, it looks like in between the two, and also it's exactly 50% of the color of the one and the other that come together. So it's literally a merger of our two projects, but then done in something that looks like it's a wood, but it's in fact a kind of an extruded aluminum facade that we are just doing now. As Dominic said, we have an office in Antwerp, and we are doing just one image, a kind of a transformation of a city block where only one building remains and all the rest in the port of Antwerp for social housing as well, where we somehow, following this idea of the buildings in the port, which have this kind of robust structures, we create a structure which can be filled in with maybe 50 different typologies of apartments that give just this one actually singular image towards the outside. So it's a kind of an urban transformation. And so why do I show you this collective housing? We don't do only social housing, and if you go to our website you will see quite a lot of it, but we also did some commercial housing as well. And this is one of the commercial housing projects, maybe that in our opinion summarizes in a very good way the relations that we always try to catch in between the program, the relation to the city, the structure, and the feeling of individuality within the collective form. This is a project in Basel. It's a Kinderspital, it's an old children's hospital in Basel, which had some very nice old trees in its garden. It's a location for people who are now working on DC Basel. It's a location along the Rhine. So this is the site of the new skyscraper of Herzog Nemeron. This is a Salvisberg Tower. That's a Morgadegolo Tower. It goes alongside the river. We were supposed to demolish that building. And what we propose is to create something that in fact fits perfectly with the urban designers' rules. So it touches all the edges that the city requires us to touch, but is in fact lifted in the air. It tries to bring, we were joking together, the frivolity of Brazil into Swiss condition. In a way works on the urban level, but also creates something maybe unexpected. We lifted the entire building. That is the program of the building. The program is actually housing for elderly, housing for old people, but not elderly in elderly in a Swiss sense. That means people that worked in pharmaceutical companies and are now old. So that means mainly couples with no children, with a lot of money, and then young families with that the city is going to bring into the center of the city and rent out the apartments to them. So we said, okay, it shouldn't be that one half lives there and they are poor, and the other half of the rich old people lives on the front. Everybody should have this view. And of course, the young people will need more bedrooms, so their apartments are stretched in this way. So basically, they have more bedrooms and can have children. The old people want to have lavish living rooms, which cost 1 million Swiss francs, and they have very little bedrooms. So in a sense, a form that works at the same time as a programmatic distribution. It looks very frivolous, but in a sense, it has a logic. It's lifted up in the air. So these are the 4 columns, 6 columns, in fact. It's lifted up in the air and open underneath. It looks something like this, continuous terraces that surround the building on all sides, different widths though. And if you look at it from the Rhine, it kind of just comes out twice on the Rhine. So it actually creates dynamics which already exist along the river. It doesn't make a city block along the river. If you look at it in a way from the ground floor, you have this continuous ground floor which goes completely underneath the building. And then you have this kind of metallic terraces that block the views of the private units. How does it really work? It's a singular structural system. These are the columns, the cores. There is another concrete beam, and there is a series of steel thin columns which support the facade and also create this kind of one singular beam that curves around and creates the building itself. So this is the columns, this is the ground floor, and then the building that's floating above it, and these old trees which are preserved and which basically go also all the way underneath the building. As I said, old people, less bedrooms, lot of living rooms, and younger families with a different way, but everybody has the view of the water. So in that sense, the structural model, the way the things work, but in that sense, maybe this is why I wanted to show this project, because in fact it kind of illustrates very well the way in which all of the elements of the building should work together. The facade of the building, the glass facade of the building is also curving out in and out, only on this part it becomes mirrored, and it's also separating private terraces, but also serves as a storage for each individual unit. So in a sense, and of course even the units that are completely back will have this kind of fantastic views of the river. Of course, so that means that we don't only work on the super cheap housing. This housing is unbelievably expensive, but the thought process, I think, is not so different. It's maybe the amount of euros that you can spend that changes, but the way you construct it is different. We have also done, and it's more like a sport of the office, a lot of small houses, as Dominic was mentioning in the beginning, and we use them more as kind of test grounds for different ideas that are maybe going to appear in other projects. But what do they really mean? This maybe diagram shows in a good way the way in which we think that the idea of a traditional house and relation of a house and the car and the landscape has changed today, that our houses have become more expensive, not expensive in money, but have expanded to include the exterior space, not only as a garden, but to include the society into them. So it's not only that the house is a tool or a location to hide, but it's also a place to communicate with the world that surrounds you. So in a sense, a house has to work like this sculpture of a young Belgian sculptor. His name is Fabrice Saman, which is more like a Russian doll, but the transparent Russian doll. So it kind of hides, but also reveals, no? And one of the first houses that we did, apart from the SB house that Dominic was mentioning, was a residence for a Dutch ambassador in Ljubljana, which was a very kind of a prestigious commission, but not a very big one. The building is organized, but the embassies, of course, have this kind of, the residences have the public part, which the ambassador would use when he makes parties, but also have a private apartment for the family. So, of course, this duality that the house has to function on both levels is something that we use to construct the building. So the this is the kitchen, toilets, and this kind of stuff. This is the office of the ambassador, and this is the small salon, the cigar room. are three columns. These three programs are three concrete columns that support the wooden construction above. The wooden construction above is the house, the actual private house of the ambassador. So in a sense, of course, the house looks like this on the outside, but it's a combination of two structural systems that comes together to unify the program and to describe the program of the building. We have also done a lot of small interventions, like this funny little pavilion, which is like a rock thrown into a garden, which is actually made like a rock because it's a hand-polished white concrete. This is also a good thing about Slovenia, is that you can still find laborers that work very cheaply, so we can actually have people sanding the building for 2 months by hand. But this is one of those constructions which is not really a house. For us, it's more like a device, more like a camera. If you look at it from the interior, it's a more device to enjoy the garden. So we never really saw this project as a house, but it was more like a kind of a play with a kind of a space of the house to frame the garden. The dialogues that houses always have with the landscape is also a kind of an important thing, and maybe this project illustrates a possibility to subvert the landscape and include the landscape. This is a very young family, and we convinced them they have a house on top of the hill to dig the hill, so that they actually make the huge earthwork to hide 50% of the program into a kind of a patio condition, and then to have only this tent dominating the landscape. So that the house, in a way, is like a little steel tent. Well, not so little; it's 25 meters long, but that basically sits in the landscape. It, of course, has the traditional form because this is required by the local authorities. But also the idea that the house has to have this pra form, and then even the two construction models: the patio house, which is hidden, which is all in concrete, and then a little steel house on top. Sometimes, when you work on the projects, you have nothing to work with. This is one of these examples. You come to a location and there is nothing there. No, there is nothing. You can't say anything about it. It's just a piece of ground. It's just a piece of earth without without any references. So this is Ljubljana, Serbia, one of these kind of sprawls where we were supposed to build a house for a family with 4 children. And maybe these 4 children become the theme of the house. This is a couple that got 4 kids after being together for 20 years. And of course, it's the miracle of science. It's not a miracle of well, Pope was visiting Strasbourg today, but he didn't help in this case. So maybe this becomes the project, the actual context of this house. So we create a house where these 2 people can live with their 4 little daughters together, but also separately at some point. So we imagine that a non-place like the habitable supermarkets of Andrea Branzi from 1960s or 70s, this could be a place where you could enjoy your living with your family. Of course, we were accused that we are doing a gas station by the neighbors, and then that we are doing a car showroom. But in fact, it's a single building, 55 meters long, where there are no rooms. So it's basically one room with 4 little boxes for every daughter to separate. And then a series of walls that come out. And when the daughters become teenagers, they will also want to be separate, which will then allow them to basically separate the room. But at this point, the mother can actually live with her 4 kids the whole day. The weekend house typology is a very stupid one, because this is some sort of total waste of space, because these are the buildings that are occupied for 48 hours a week, at best. So that means that they are basically piles of building material standing around. So we did this one in a kind of a protected area in a national park to replace an old structure that was existing here. So we did a building which would look similar to more like a kind of object thrown into landscape, which only on Friday evening would become a house. So on Friday evening it could explode and become a building, and it would serve the purpose of a building for the 2 days. It would also include all the outside spaces. We try to, let's say, not really touch the ground, so also all the outside spaces of the house are included. Because also on a Sunday evening when you leave the house, the landscape would somehow remain unspoiled. This is something very, Slovenes love weekend houses, but they also spend far too much money on them. Another weekend house on the Croatian coast, where there was an old building, and then we added a new building. Of course, all of these 18th century buildings were made, they were never made for enjoyment of nature, what we expect today from tourists, from tourism. So basically what we add to this house is we add the living room, but the living room has no walls, and we add the living room in a different construction model. Here the complete construction is in white concrete. It's again hand polished, and then we place against this construction the drywall like they use for separating walls, because these houses were built solid out of stone, and then the walls around the houses are this kind of drywalls, and we actually combine the two models of construction, one which is for the ephemeral together with the one which is for the real building. So the old building we renovated, and this new one, the kind of let's say open air living space, we constructed even some spaces. This is where I sleep when I visit in the summer. This is a guest bedroom, but it also has this kind of facade which completely slides away, so you can actually sleep completely outside. So, okay, the stupidity of an architect. This is what we thought was going to be the fantastic area to sunbathe in the summer. It's actually 60 degrees here, so nobody ever sat on this fantastic terrace that we designed. So as architects, we are also very, very stubborn, but also very, very stupid very often. Sometimes the houses exist in kind of imaginary pairs. This is a house which has its pair. You see, we had to demolish a double house, half of the double house, and build it again. But it became a kind of a ghost, a white ghost. But at the same time, we had to do exactly the same thing in Ljubljana. This was Zagreb, this is Ljubljana. Two cities 150 kilometers apart. We kind of create an artificial dialogue in the office, and these are the two buildings, which again, the double house that we demolished, again made out of steel, in fact. And again, discussing with the neighbor, but also discussing in discussion with the other house, which is 200 kilometers away. So we are the link for the project. For a young family in Prague, we are just finishing this house. Prague suburbia. There's nothing, again, one of those no places. Kind of, there was a teacher of mine who was always saying, when you go there, there's no there. So it's kind of nothing, you know. Basically, the house has to create its own urban conditions. So the house becomes a small village. So every space of the house, for a very young family with zero money, is in fact a separate little house. And we try to create it in such a way that that all of these spaces can be constructed by themselves, because the budget is so low. So it's a kind of a very simple wooden construction where we more or less instructed them how to build it. It was a Belgian guy in our office who worked with them, who explained to them, and they're basically weekend builders now with all of their family and friends, and they're all finishing the house. The house is then something like this. The living room is the only, it only has 160 square meters or something. This is the living room, but it's also the main circulation of the house, and all the other rooms are just separate little boxes. The separate little boxes are again the construction that connects all of the others, and then of course the living room is the one which remains in the natural wood, and all the other wood is this pre-patinated gray wood. So what I was trying to show you a quick overview, but I'll also show one project in the city of Ljubljana that we designed for friends of ours who asked us to demolish. It's a very expensive, well, it doesn't look like it, but it's a very expensive neighborhood because all of the embassies have moved here. So we demolished this house a few years back. These were the friends of ours who asked us to design what they said, small house. They have no children, so they said 1 bedroom, 1 living room. And we said, fantastic, finally somebody who doesn't have this kind of huge ambitions. But then they come the next time and then they tell us, yes, but we want a swimming pool, and we want a gym, and we want a music room, and we want this and that. So finally it became a huge house. So how to make a huge house small? What this location has next to it is a kind of a very large natural biotope, something that is protected by the city because of some sort of parasites that live there. So we said, okay, maybe this can be their garden, because obviously the program is completely going to fill the site. So this is their garden, this is what they look at, not what they actually walk in. And the house is basically covering the entire plot with some patios in it, and then we have the 2 different typologies standing one on top of the other. If you look on the plan of the building, it actually looks like that. It looks like some sort of a landscape configuration. If you now come to this street, the building has no fences because all of this greenery is its fence. It has this very special configuration. It's constructed completely out of wood, like out of concrete, rough concrete. It looks very perfect on this picture, but it's a relatively very simple concrete, not specially finished. Turned inside out, like a glove, with no apparently no communication towards the street, because this is the only light that you actually see when the light is on. It's a bit Plečnik motif, because he always has this kind of motif of entering the building as a very important part of the building. Once you enter the building, you actually see the garden. So you don't see the living room, but you see across and you see the garden. I'm not going to go into the structural model of the building, but it's actually standing on a very, very few elements, this building. And then you go out towards the terrace. What we thought was a very good feeling to have this very, very, the good thing about old buildings is that you have these super thick walls, which we cannot make anymore. So you have this kind of transition space. When you go out, you actually are walking, you have a distance to walk if you want to go out of the building. Today's buildings have this thickness. So we want to have the same feeling on this building, so we basically created these very deep wooden windows where you can actually jump out of the building. If you look at the building from the outside, it also, which was very important for us, fails structurally, because in fact the structural logic of this building doesn't exist. It's cast as a piece of concrete, it's like a piece of stone. It doesn't have a column in the middle, it basically stretches the weight of the huge box on top to the next corner of the building. So this was somehow the idea that the house, that the building should be so unique, so unitary, so just kind of one construction. This is the complete section through the building, where you see the basement, and the basement, which is completely filled with programs. So you go to the basement, this is the first patio, which we call the beach. The second space is the swimming pool in between two sheets of glass which slide down, so you can swim in the summer. Then you have the space of the workspace and the kind of a gym space, and you have the kind of series of other spaces in the building. On top, just a box with the bedroom, which of course is oriented towards the east, so catches the eastern sun. Once you go out of your bedroom, you are again faced with the garden. So this is in fact the garden. Well, this is what they own, but this is what they have as a garden. So as I said, this transition point, this ability, well, this is a good thing about the small houses. They give you this ability to rethink the particular elements of the building and maybe allow you to try things that you cannot never try with the larger projects. Finally, I would like to show this image as the kind of our idea of the collective. This is a wallpaper again in my house. So you look at it and it looks like this. It looks like a fuzzy pink, pinkish surface. If you come very near, it's this. It's actually 4 millimeters wide, faces of, well, I don't know how many, maybe 35,000 Korean people who are all schoolmates of, or the generation of this Korean artist who actually painted. So what you see as a kind of a fuzzy cloud is in fact consists out of very, very particular human faces. So in that somehow, sometimes as architects we have to play in between these two scales, the kind of collective that you don't see, and that collective is consisting out of these millions and millions of very, very individual human beings with very, very specific wishes, and some of our buildings also work on that level. This is the building that, first of the public buildings that I'm going to flip through, the School of Mathematics, which we had to build some years ago on top of another building, completely not owned by the university. So we basically had to build a public building on top of an already existing building. So what we did is that we tried to create all of these spaces, the aulas of the school and whatever, to have a very direct communication with the city. And these are these open windows. And all the rest is, in fact, just completely hidden in a kind of a, I'm not going to go into details, in a kind of a screen of this kind of fuzzy programs. All of these prints are different on this glass, and they're all exterior. So, in a way, each of these prints is defined by the amount of light that each of the rooms behind can take in. We did this project for the University of Antwerp, the central building for all the lecture halls in a kind of a very green campus, where we try to include the series of old trees that existed on our site as a facade of the building. So of course the main building has to be a circle, but we don't have enough programs for a circle, so it's a square with a kind of a slice of a watermelon. And the slice of a watermelon is a lecture hall. And then the building also looks like a slice of a watermelon because it is literally sliced, so you see the section of the building coming out towards the square. And this section of the building is very industrial, very rough. It just connects all the classroom spaces into one, while on the back it is really literally closed, and all of these balconies are in fact escape routes or the smoking areas of the school. We are now currently doing another university building for the University of Brussels, a renovation of the old brewery in the center of Brussels, and addition of a new building, where we are trying to create a condition where the public space of the city comes into the school and becomes part of the school. So the blue is the new and the red is the old building that we are renovating. So that this complete neighborhood, which is very dense, it's a very, very mixed neighborhood which is now being gentrified, but still a lot of Moroccan families live there, somehow will become a part of the ground floor of the school. So it will become part of this. This is not our project. This is Martin Creed, a British artist who is working on the public art for the school. And of course, the complete compression of the buildings inside this neighborhood, with also the open spaces of the school included in the volume of the school, and etc., etc. You will have to see it. We are now also constructing the first and only mosque in Slovenia, in Ljubljana. It's a completely Islamic center, which we are just now building. Where for us, the idea of a mosque was this is a completely exterior construction. I mean, I'm not going to tell you very much because you're going to see it pretty soon, and it looks better in reality. But this was our inspiration. We tried to explain to the clients that religion is something, in fact, completely weightless. And it shouldn't really be a building, so that the symbol of the religion, this is the 15th century Persian miniature, the Iranian soldiers going across the Asian territories with the tents as mosques. So because the community, the Islamic community of Slovenia is of course also migrant community, we somehow didn't see them as warriors, but saw them as some people that actually carry their religion with themselves and that doesn't have so much material. So in fact, the dome on the space of the mosque is in fact defined by this huge blue textile, which basically is completely hidden within the space. Much like this artist, this is another work of the same Korean artist, who made a copy of his own house. So this is a staircase of his own house from Korea that he carries around with himself around the world. So in a sense, together with the, as you see, the electricity cable and the switch over there. So it looks extremely fragile, but it describes a kind of reality that you can take with you. So these public buildings have, of course, can be have this ability to tell stories in a way. And this is the university library that I showed you in the beginning, National and University Library of Ljubljana, and this is the location where we are supposed to. Well, we won the competition a year and a half ago, where we were supposed to build a new one. This is the library that I showed you in the beginning. It's a kind of a. It's well, of course, incredibly important building. You have to visit it to really understand how it really works, but it has this kind of a few wonderful spaces within it. It has this monumental appearance if you look at it from the air. If you walk next to it, it has a few of these kind of monumental elements. This is the reading room, the way you see it from the inside. If you go outside, if you go inside the reading room, there's this incredible warm feeling in this kind of monumental space. So you have something that combines the Boulez experience, because of course Plečnik was very much influenced by the history of architecture. Nothing happens out of nothing. We are always working with the things that existed before us and are going to exist after us. So, he's kind of interpreting this, but of course adding his own specificities. The definition, the relation between the structure and the program in Plečnik's buildings is extremely important. The shitty thing about this project is that it sits on top of the Roman city. So the problem was basically we were asked to design a museum for the Roman ruins, and then a building on top of it. So we said it's completely ridiculous. These Roman ruins are, of course, they are valuable, they are Roman, but in themselves don't present such an incredible discovery. There is really nothing to see except for the kind of structure of the Roman city. So we were very interested in the idea of how can you basically use the history, and how can you maybe work with this? This is the overlap of a contemporary Ljubljana with the Roman city, and our building is somewhere over here, no? Somewhere here. And then we also looked at Plečnik, who did these things, I don't know, for people who have been in Ljubljana. He constructed the complete new histories, no? This is the Roman wall, so this is really the city of Rome. This is the edge of the city of Rome, but it's only there up to here, is original. You can see how the texture of the wall changes from here to here. And then he invents a completely, this never existed, of course, when nobody ever constructed these kind of things. So he basically uses history to kind of construct a new history. So we said, okay, maybe this is a possible way to do it. A very important thing, similar to Strasbourg, the city of Ljubljana lives from students. It wouldn't exist if there were no students. Students are somehow the machine, the motor of the city. So all of these pink things are this is a school of architecture. So for me, it's very convenient. I sit here, and this is the site for the library. But these are the university programs that actually make the city alive. So Slovenia, Ljubljana has this kind of confetti that doesn't have a campus. The whole city is a campus. So on this location, we decided to use, so you see how the two geometries collide. We decided to use the pink things that you somehow see on this image, are the archaeological excavations. We decided to basically use them to define the spaces of the library. The main level of the library, all the reading rooms, all the daily reading rooms of the library are within the Roman ruins. We did a building that doesn't close the city block. We did a building that doesn't, we were supposed to demolish this 19th century building, but we said, okay, how can you decide now that Roman history is very valuable and 19th century history is not valuable? So we preserved everything on the site. Every history has its meaning. If you try to start keeping one, and then even the old Volkswagen becomes important. So we did this building which would have the two squares to enter, which would have this kind of models of circulation, which would look like this, so that very carefully, these are the floor plans of the Roman houses. This is the cloaca, this is Cardo de Cumanus. Inside there, we actually looked for the programs that could fit into the old Roman city, and we filled them in. And we created a building that is a collision in between the geometry of the city today and the geometry of the Roman city. Of course, within this space, we constructed, so you see that this is completely defined by the Roman ruins. This is, of course, a perspective. And then on the upper floors, we keep this space as a big reading room, which, of course, what is the library today? I mean, it's stupid to think of a library anymore as a kind of a space where you keep a few million books, and people come and touch the books and pull them out of the shelf. For university, because it's going to be university, for university it's a social platform. It's of course important to have the feeling of books, because this is why these buildings exist. But it's much more important to have this ability for maybe 1,000 or 2,000 students to come into one space and feel like it's a kind of a living room of the university. So this is the only purpose that, in fact, otherwise everybody can download a book, more or less, no? So we have the library, and then we have this huge reading room, which by accident is exactly the same size like Plečnik's reading room. I didn't show you on the previous slide. And we have this very strange, what you see, structural system, which defines the edges, and we only insert the core, which defines the surfaces of the building. So in fact, of course, it looks very weird as a kind of geometrical thing, but it's defined, somehow we felt very relieved because it's defined by the exterior. We don't participate in this. We only guide the forces of the project. And of course there are offices at some point, and of course the storages, because you can't go under the archaeology with the storages, millions and millions of books are on top of your head. So all of the storages are then also used, as you see on this section, to bring light back into this reading room. The reading room is now no longer one space, but it's in fact a series of platforms that somehow is kind of a common ground or common space of the university, overlooking, of course, the old city of Ljubljana. This is where you see it in the model, how the light will penetrate through all the storage spaces and machine rooms and come down into this, space underneath. What we tried to explain to the jury was that it's the space that is not books that is important. This is Rachel Whiteread, the British sculptor, and this is the cast of the shelves, but not of the books, but the kind of negative of the books and the spaces of the shelves. So in that sense, somehow, we wanted a building that would reflect this other space, not the actual program it has, because of course the library is a bit obsolete, but the meaning of the space that remains. So this is what shows the structure of the building, what we said. Can the structure be the facade? And can the facade look the same from the inside as from the outside? So can you perceive the building from the inside in the same way as from the outside? Plečnik's prefab columns, which he was using a lot, came very handy. And this is our building. We made the construction, which is in fact working like a wall. It's a series of columns, very thick like this, much thicker than me. That is spaced very rhythmically, but that basically structurally works like a wall. So why is this important? Because at points when you want more light inside the building, like this point, or this point, you can make the columns thinner because the wall is still going to function. So in a sense, it's a structural model that is very rigid, but at the same time completely free. Why do we also have columns? Because these columns, you can also, when you try to hit the archaeological ruin underneath, you can also skip it, because you can take the column out and the whole structure is still going to continue working like a wall on top of it. So in that sense, you can have a building which has the rigidity of a monument, but at the same time fragility of a kind of a breathing thing. It looks very banal and almost postmodern in a way, but at the same time it's also completely almost like an amoeba, completely reacting to the surroundings or to the program. So this would be, well, not really from my office is on the second floor, but in fact within this very homogeneous facade you are going to start noticing these subtle changes in the structure, which also indicate subtle changes in the program behind. These are the reading rooms, the special reading rooms for the maps, for the old maps, while the big reading room of course is defined. This is a model for the competition which actually one Spanish girl in our office made herself. If you look at from the city of Ljubljana, you would have these two monumental spaces again somehow communicating together. This is a view from the old castle of Ljubljana above the city. No? So, and then of course, which I forgot to mention, but it's obvious, the ground floor of the library will never exist. It will always be the underground that is the history where the whole thing begins. As in the end, I'm going to only show you one project which is not really ours, which is the project which is designed by 4 offices. Did you go to see this building? We were asked to do a competition against 4 of our friends who we are always competing against, because we are all kind of offices that started at the same time and we always fight against each other, but we are also friends. None of us had any work, so we were asked by a group of artists to do a project for a small museum up in the mountains in Slovenia. And we said, okay, nobody has work, so we better do this project together. And this project became somehow a testing ground. Is it possible to work with another office? Because it was not so much the idea of if you're going to survive, because you're not going to survive. We all lost money on the project, of course, but that to testing ground, whether you can all of a sudden in the middle of your career start working with some other people on a totally equal level. So it was a good experience, but this is the middle of nowhere. This is really, I don't know. I don't know these places. Like if you would say Les Arcs, you know? I mean, it's something that kind of God has said goodbye, or even the Pope. But it kind of exists, a lost place in the summer in the mountains. And what is interesting about this place, and of course this museum is for space technologies, which is funniest. There's nothing in this. This is a village with 600 people, nothing around it, and it has a museum of space. European Museum of Space Technologies. Why? Because a guy who was born in this village in 1912 to 1919, where he died at the age of 35, wrote a book which was a base for the space exploration. So Werner von Braun, where he was doing American NASA program for space colonization, or all of the other people after him, were always using the basic postulates which were written by the guy in the end of 19th, beginning of 20th century. A weirdo from this village, who of course was living in Vienna, not in this village. Basically this is a habitable wheel, no? So you see the beds and you see the showers and whatever. So this guy was coming from this village, and this is why a group of crazy artists decided to make a museum for him. For them, the museum was not about really making a museum about this guy. There's nothing to do. It's just the location, but it's a museum which is more about, and I think this is a very good idea, about they call it culturalization of space. Space, at the moment, we see only as a scientific category, no? It's something that we are conquering through progress of science. But the space, according to these artists, not according to me, is also a space for expansion of our culture. We are not only scientists, and we are not only people aiming at conquering other worlds through science, but also through culture. So this guy, one of these 2 artists, his ultimate goal is that he's going to basically, well, he says die, but die in space, so that his final act of his artistic activity is going to be that he gets shot into the space without, presumably without oxygen, of course. So we did a building which is in fact the interpretation of this idea of this guy. We did it with 4 offices. Each of the offices participated equally. We are all more or less the same generation. We did a building which would somehow illustrate what this guy is trying to do. We managed, which convinced the village people, 600 people, that they should demolish their cultural home. They had a small cultural hall. So we convinced them that they should demolish it, because they should put their cultural space inside this building, so that this should not be a museum, which is very stupid to have a museum in this place, but to include all of their programs, local programs, into this building. We of course tried to create a building which, of course, this is the picture, communicates with the other 2 big poles, the Protestant and the Catholic Church, and this is the third, the little Church of Science and Culture. And we tried to create a building which would physically create the conditions of this research of this guy. Basically, the building consists out of the big hall, which is used by the entire village, a library, space for the retired people, and then the museum starts only in the back. The museum is this kind of a big wheel that comes up and comes down. So it's basically a continuously looping surface. We tried to create a building where every space would deny gravity, so nothing is flat in this building, so the whole building is in fact curving one way or the other, and whenever you walk through the building you basically feel unsafe, so you basically feel like you're not really on this earth. The museum space which wraps around, on top of the museum you'll enter into this space, which is a big staircase which brings you to the roof, and 3 artist residency programs. This is the library of the museum. And then you would come out on the roof and then use the surrounding ring to come down to the ground floor. So this is the exhibition space. It's extremely rough building. We had a very small budget to build it. So it's basically the material, the concrete as it comes out of the casting is the interior of the building. And I think it works very well. It's impossible to draw sections of this building. We had an incredibly good structural engineer who was able to calculate this enormous amount of curving surfaces, which you don't even notice as an architect when you draw them, but only if you draw them 3D you realize that the things are not meeting together. So these are the residency programs. These are the only flat spaces inside the entire building, are the 3 small offices where the artists can actually work on their own projects. That take you to the roof and around, and like this, and then around back through here into outside into the landscape. So the building is completely integrated into the landscape. You can climb into the building and climb down by without actually entering the building. So oh, this is the artist. This is the crazier one. This is the other one. So finally we did a project that we didn't do ourselves. We all felt very good about it. We also did a project that was somehow very much inspired by the work of these artists, so that was really not us so much. And we also did a project that somehow was trying to basically put forward some ideas that the community, also, you know, the old ladies that do the knitting also sit in this building, among all the spacesuits of the NASA astronauts. And maybe this is a good moment to just finalize. Maybe this is the night of the opening of the museum, of this building. It was very funny because we are somewhere in the middle of the mountains, and there are these crazy artists projecting images from space. In fact, then at some point in the night, there were thousands of people from all the villages from the mountains came to the opening. So at some point, there was an astronaut from the space station who announced the opening of the building, so the small building somewhere hidden deep in the mountains. And then this building is working with this kind of artists. This is a Swiss choir, a group of Swiss men who sing. They produce continuously one voice, one sound, but the machines that they stand on tilt them so the sound changes. So you create music by tilting people through space. By the way, this is the president of Slovenia, the guy sitting over there. Also on this opening. So you see how they work very well with the building, because nothing is flat in the building, and they're never flat, of course, because this is what in fact produces this sound. So in a sense, this maybe as a kind of a maybe final image of the presentation. I would like to thank you for your patience, and if you have any questions, you can ask me now or later. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasa, for this very nice conference. So, perhaps some questions, quelques questions. Peut être aussi en français et on peut le traduire si vous voulez. I have a lot of questions, but
yeah, but you can ask them anytime.
I can ask them after. So if no questions?
No questions. Okay. Well, thank you for.
That's the question.
Huh? Yeah. Okay. How many people are in this project? We are 12 people in the office. And the two of us, 2 partners and 12. We deliberately try to keep the office very small. Not deliberately because we are so we can't handle more people. So somehow it doesn't really work. It doesn't because we have a completely flat organization. We don't have people who are bosses and people who are helpers, but everybody does everything. So in that sense, it's very difficult to run it on a larger scale. So this is how we try to handle even the largest projects with 12 people in Ljubljana, plus the 2 of us, so 14, 15 people, never more. In Brussels or in Antwerp, where we have a Belgian office, we only have 3 people. But it's then separate, it's easier to handle because then it's not together with us.
Do you manage competitions? Do you get commissions as well?
Well, most of our work is from competitions. Of course, this circular building the competition failed because the 4 participating teams joined together, so they couldn't choose anything. But it's a good strategy. But most of the projects are from almost all of them, not the houses, not small houses, but everything else is from competitions. The library competition was a very huge international competition. It was 170 projects. So it was more like a surprise that somebody picks you out of one. It's more like half lottery, half competition, no? Maybe he didn't like it.
How did you get to the design decision to develop diagrams? After you said you were all the team, I think that was the same. How did you get?
Yes.
How do we work on projects? Well, basically, the projects are organized so that there is always one person who works with the 2 of us on the project. So we don't, even the largest projects, there's always initial team, only 2 of us, and it's basically a discussion that makes the initial ideas, and then we maybe include more people. But generally, of course, you have to start small. Otherwise, if you would start debating with the whole class of people, it would be difficult. But generally, this is how it starts, and then this one person takes over the project and carries it with the team. Because we can't, I mean, at any point in the office there are maybe 20 projects or maybe more. Well, some of them die, some of them get built, but we can't handle everything. We can't handle everything ourselves. So we basically are always in the beginning of the process, and then just get included from time to time in the group.
How do you do the associations in the office?
Everything is done in the office. All the models and all the there are young people that do the models. This is maybe a special category. but otherwise, the 3Ds, everything is produced in the office. Somehow it's very handy because we use the 3Ds to design the buildings. We don't, of course, what you see here is the presentations, but in fact, when we are now developing the projects, we are testing everything immediately, not so much to fascinate the client, but to actually explain the projects to ourselves. No? So the models and the 3Ds are in the office.
And just a final question. It's the house that it's in this neighborhood where the embassies are now. And you said that there is a swimming pool and it has a place match. You said that the place is going down. Is it literally going down?
The one on the left of the pool, yes, was going down. It's broken, but yes. That house is now for sale, so if you're interested. The owners are moving to India. But we are doing a house for them in India now. No, but that building was a very interesting experiment because, of course, you have to have a client. They're friends and clients that can afford and build impossible things. So of course it's a maybe unique situation that you can do this kind of things. It doesn't happen very often. Most of our houses are built for very, very small budgets. This one, of course, is not social housing.
Could you maybe name some architecture artists who inspired you in your work?
Well, I didn't show today, but we worked a lot with the artists. This is why a lot of art pops up in everything I talk about, because we did art biennales. We did a layout for the 2003 Venice Biennale. We worked on a lot of exhibition designs with a lot of different curators, something, one abbey in Eindhoven, or in Amsterdam, or in Venice, in Italy a lot, or in Slovenia as well, of course. So we actually have a lot of friends who are artists, and of course we are influenced by their work, and through them we also find out a lot of stuff. But most of the arts, all of the art that you saw today is basically from my house. I just went around and took pictures. But generally, I think it's a little bit. I think that architecture and art, well, there are a lot of differences. Architecture is not art and will never be art, in my opinion. No? But it does. There are some aspects that architecture and art share, and in my opinion, it's the idea. And of course, art is better in that than architecture, because architecture is too slow. Unfortunately, our buildings are still made out of mud. Okay, it's a little bit more fashionable mud. It's white concrete or whatever, but it's still this kind of archaic method of building the buildings. Even this building, however contemporary it looks, it's actually very slow to be produced. Art has this ability to be produced very quickly, or relatively much quicker than architecture. That's one aspect. So it can be critical much more intensively, because you can do it much quicker. Also, but both of them somehow try to describe the world. I think that this architecture, just like art, is a tool to describe the world that surrounds us. And all of the projects are parts of this description of the world. Of course, they work with the clients. Of course, they are for people. Of course, but in a way, if there is one thing that they try to do, in my opinion, is a kind of a small description of the universe that we inhabit. And that's something they share. Of course, art has this ability to be much more critical, because it's responsible only to an artist and not so much to society. Because if we build a building which is shit, then it's going to be there for another 50 years. It's not only in the private domain of an artist studio, but it's in a public domain forever. No? So whatever mistakes you make as an architect are going to be there for a very, very long time. No? So in that sense, I think it's kind of art has more freedom. Art has much more freedom to be critical than architecture. Sometimes buildings. Well, I don't know. Well, I don't think that all of the construction that we make is architecture to start with. It's a question how much of it is actually. It's very often you have the feeling that in fact some projects, if I don't call them buildings, projects look more like accumulation of building material than anything else. No? So in the sense they have no meaning and no let's say no destiny or nothing about them. So there is a very good artist now that we talk about art, Lara Almasegui, the Spanish artist. If you remember, in the last Biennale she had these piles of garbage in the Spanish pavilion. She collected all the garbage from the canals. But otherwise, before that, she was doing fantastic projects because she was calculating the weights of the buildings. There were fantastic projects where basically you had the weight of Sao Paulo calculated, weight and cubic meters of building materials that create the city of, I don't know, 15 or 20 million people. Have a look. So, in a sense, I think art and architecture are related, but are very different.
The last question.
When can we leave?
First, I have one question, because I know that Vasa is also, of course, teaching architecture, and for us, and you are mainly students here in the room, what is the role of your concept sketches? We have seen a lot of small, nice sketches, and when you are teaching, for example, for now young students, you invite them to do all this kind of conceptual sketches, like you will show us. Is it for you a very important tool to be clear in the concept, in the way how the building is done, in the way of structural conception, but also on the programmatic conception.
Well, of course, you know that, since you already mentioned in the beginning, that it's part of my Dutch heritage, no? Because of course these things have been come very much from my education in the Netherlands. But for us, this schedule, of course, we are not ashamed also to say that a lot of these sketches are post-festum, no? So they are not made in the beginning of the project. So don't expect the eureka moment where you're going to just do this doodle, and this doodle is going to be the resolution of all the problems. But what I think architecture is sometimes, of course, too complex. When you try to think about a project, you are thinking about 1 million things. If you, somewhere towards the end of the work on the project, if you are able to push all the piles of paper that you have produced and maybe just make one very quick, laconic explanation of the most important thing about that building, whether it relates to program or to context or to whatever, to history or whatever, is it possible? I mean, can the building communicate on this very banal level? This is also very important, because I don't think that don't make buildings for other architects. Of course, I'm showing it now to other architects, but in a sense they are in public use, no? They're in public domain, and the School of Mathematics is used by the students of mathematics and not by architects. So in that sense, you're trying to also see if your buildings can be perceived on a very, very flat, direct level. Of course, they are much more complex, so don't think that the buildings can ever be so simple, no? But there has to be this level of perception which is very direct and very simple and very obvious, and you have to be able to, I mean, even my mother, who is a dentist, has to be able to understand the story of a building that we are trying. So this is somehow, this is more the attempt of these diagrams. It's not, and of course it's a very good tool to communicate to people, to communicate to clients. How do you explain to your client that the building is in fact simple, however complex it is and however many millions it costs? You have to convince them that it's actually very easy to build, no? So it has this good idea. So this is why we use it as a tool for communication. It's not really something that is a eureka moment captured in this one image, no? It's something that I use to communicate to you, because it's very easy to explain the project. If you see only that, you get 60%. Of course, all the complexities of the project can fall apart, because finally, you know, in the end of everything that you read, you remember only the main, let's say, the main bits and pieces of the information, no? So we know that the Pope was in Strasbourg today, but we have no idea what he talked about. So this is the sketch.
So,
thank you very much for coming.
okay.
See you soon in Ljubljana.
Thank you very much.